Hey everybody, welcome to another devotional. I hope your week has gone well. I've enjoyed being with you this week in these teaching moments and being able to share together. And today, I want to talk with you a little bit about struggling, being weary. Maybe you can relate to that. You know, every once in a while, I find myself, I'm just struggling. And I've got this, I can't think of a better word to describe it than just a weariness. And it's not just physical, but it's emotional. And I think probably a number of us can relate to that, especially living in the times that we are. And I don't want to go into that any further, but maybe we'll have a word of encouragement for each other today. So, if you have a Bible, let me get you to turn in the Old Testament to 1 Kings chapter 19. And we're going to spend a couple of minutes there. And I promise you, you will be interested and I think encouraged by this story that we'll read out of 1 Kings chapter 19. Now, let me give you a quick bit of background. You'd have to jump back into 1 Kings chapter 18, and you're going to find out about a king named Ahab, and he's got a wife, the queen, and her name is Jezebel. And if that sends off alarm bells to you, that's probably a good thing. And then you're going to find out about this great contest that Elijah had with the prophets of Baal. And it took place on Mount Carmel. And I got to tell you, when I went to the Holy Lands, I saw the spot, I saw the mountain, and it was pretty amazing. Remembering this story that you read about in 1 Kings chapter 18 and realizing this is where it took place. And so I'm not going to tell you the whole story. If you jump back and read in chapter 18 of 1 Kings, you'll read this very exciting story about Elijah, the prophet of God, in a contest against 450 prophets of Baal. And the bottom line is, Elijah wins, or better said, God wins, and all of those prophets of Baal are put to death. Now, that's going to bring us into 1 Kings chapter 19. And believe it or not, that's going to bring us to thinking about struggling and being weary. And the guy we're going to be looking at is the one that God used in a marvelous way on Mount Carmel, that prophet Elijah. Now, before we read anything, I want to stop here and I want to say something to all of you. And I couldn't be more serious. And I have found that this actually is encouraging to people like you, and it's encouraging to me. And that is, I want to say to you, it is okay to struggle. It's okay to be weary. It's okay at times to be down. And you don't need to feel like something's really wrong with you or something is spiritually out of sync with you just because you're struggling, you're weary, you're down. Okay? So, let's read together. Let's read the first 5 verses and we'll say a word about that and then we'll move on. So, 1 Kings chapter 19, beginning at verse 1. Now, Ahab told Jezebel, you remember who they are, everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them." In other words, if I don't kill you. Look at verse 3. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom brush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. Now, you got to remember, he's just experienced this incredible victory on Mount Carmel, and now Jezebel is after him and promises to kill him. And what does Elijah do? Well, he's so low that he wants to die. And by the way, don't write this off as some kind of, just a Bible story that isn't real. No, he really wanted to die. When we're struggling, there are certain things that go on often. And we see this in Elijah's life. I call this the anatomy of struggle. First of all, fear. Remember, Elijah is afraid, and I would be too. And what fear does is it leads often to flight. In other words, withdrawing. And so immediately Elijah, he's on the run, and he runs out into the wilderness because he's running for his life. He's afraid and he's fleeing. And then it leads to a weariness. When we're afraid, when we're struggling, often there is a weariness that comes into our lives. And let me tell you, I have found it's in 3 areas. And I think this is true of Elijah, what we just read. There's a physical weariness. We just get tired. Our bodies get tired. And then number 2, there's an emotional weariness. Our emotions get frayed. And that's why often we can find ourselves very sad, maybe weepy, or we can find ourselves angry and short-tempered with people that actually we love. But when we're struggling, often there's an emotional weariness. And finally, and I'm talking to you as a Christian now, there can be a spiritual weariness, a spiritual depression, if you please. I found that in my life from time to time, where I just don't have spiritual energy, and maybe I find my faith lacking. Can you relate to that? I think we see all of that in Elijah's life. Now, let's pick it up at verse 5, the latter half, and read through verse 9, okay? All at once, Elijah is under that bush and he's fallen asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So Elijah got up and he ate and he drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. Very interesting. Now, we don't have a lot of time, but let me just quickly make 2 observations. Number 1, God knows precisely where Elijah is. And here's the beautiful thing. God knows precisely where you are, where I am. He knows when we're struggling. He knows when we're weary. He gets it. And I love the way that God tenderly ministers through the angel to Elijah, which leads to my second observation, and that is God knows exactly what you and I need. He knew what Elijah needed. I love it. Elijah needed to eat. He needed to rest. And then he needed to eat again. And who took care of that? God did. God provided for him. And then said, I need you to go to Mount Horeb. Okay? So what I'd like to encourage you with is, even in our struggles, when it gets confusing and we're not quite sure what's going on, God is there. God knows. And God provides. And you notice what God did not do? God didn't jump all over and criticize Elijah. He loved him. And he'll do the same for you and me. Now, let's end this by looking at verses 9 through 13, okay? So, it says at the verse 9, Elijah went into a cave when he got to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and he spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah. What are you doing here, Elijah? And he replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, tore down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. He's down. He's depressed. And I've been there. Nothing's right. Everything's negative. You listen to Elijah, and he just tells God the truth. This is what I think. This is how I feel. Look at verse 11. Then the Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. You need to look at that verse. Look at it again. You see it? Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Here's how we close. Just an observation. God knows what we need. And what God did for Elijah is he brought him back home. He brought him back to the mountain of the Lord, Mount Horeb. If you do a little research, some wonderful things happened on Mount Horeb. It was in Elijah's mind where God lived. And so God took this weary, struggling prophet. He loved him and he said, come on home. Come to where I am. And let me take care of you. And if you read the rest of the chapter, then God sends him back out. But I just think it's beautiful that God brought him home. And you know what? That's what he does for us when we're struggling. He brings us home. He loves on us, gets us healthy, and then sends us back out. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.